Marcus Hale never imagined the sound that would destroy his world would be something as small as a muffled laugh behind a half-closed office door. He had come with sunshine in his chest, holding his son's hand, carrying his wife's favorite lunch, ready to fix the growing distance between them with one simple surprise. But as he stood in that quiet hallway, the laughter inside sharpened, followed by a low male voice and the unmistakable thud of something or someone against a desk. In that instant, the universe shifted. The man who had spent years sacrificing for his family realized he was standing on the edge of a truth no husband should ever have to face. What he heard next didn't just hint at betrayal. It opened the first crack in a story far darker, far bigger than he ever expected. For a heartbeat, his mind tried to file it under normal office noise. People joked, dropped files, moved chairs. Yet his body betrayed him. Heart-racing palms, damp every instinct, screaming that what he was hearing was wrong. Leo swung their joined hands. "Daddy, is that Mommy? Can we go in now?" Marcus looked down at him. 7 years old, with a cowlick at the back of his head and shoelaces already coming undone. In his free hand, Leo clutched a folded drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands below a lopsided sun. Above them, in crooked blue letters, he had written, "Lunch with Mommy." This was supposed to be a good day. He had woken before dawn, quietly so he wouldn't disturb Amelia's rare extra minutes of sleep. He'd packed Leo's school lunch, then moved on to hers, the salad from the cafe she loved, but rarely had time to visit a brownie. A little note he'd written and rewritten 3 times before finally settling on simple words. "Proud of you. Love you. Always." He'd hummed as he worked some old tune from the radio, imagining her surprise when she saw him and Leo at her door. In his mind, the scene had played out so easily. She would open the door, eyes tired, but softening, laughing, as Leo flung his arms around her waist. She would kiss Marcus, quickly whisper that this was exactly what she needed. For a few minutes, she wouldn't be a senior brand strategist or whatever new title they'd given her. She would just be Amelia. His Amelia. But that was before the laugh. He replayed their morning in his head now, as if combing it for clues he'd missed. The way she had barely touched her breakfast, more interested in the notification lighting up her phone. The small frown when he suggested bringing her lunch. The too quick smile as she said, "Today's insane. Really don't bother already halfway out the door." He had chosen to hear the smile and ignore the words. Now, under the humming fluorescent lights of Horizon Bridge marketing, it was harder to ignore anything. The hallway around them was mostly empty. Voices drifted up faintly from the lobby, the distant clatter of dishes from the building cafe. Most doors were shut, little rectangles of frosted glass lined up in neat corporate order. Amelia's door was just one more in the row. Her name was printed in clean black letters on the plaque, "Amelia Hale, Senior Brand Strategist." Seeing it used to fill Marcus with pride. Today the letters looked like they were keeping him out. Another sound slipped through the door. A soft gasp, not startled, not afraid, intimate. Then the scrape of a chair, quick and clumsy, and that same male voice, lower now, the words blurred, but the tone unmistakably close. "He won't know," the voice murmured. "Relax." Marcus's grip tightened on the paper bag until he felt the faint give of crushed cardboard grease pressing against his skin. The sunflowers in his other hand trembled petals brushing his wrist. Images rose unbidden: Amelia in cheap jeans and an oversized college hoodie, laughing in the cab of his old truck as rain beat so hard on the windshield they had to shout to hear each other. Amelia in a hospital bed, hair stuck to her forehead, cradling a red-faced Leo and whispering, "We did it. We're a family." Amelia at their second-hand kitchen table textbooks spread everywhere, promising, "When I make it, I'll never forget how I got there. I'll never forget you." He had believed that, like he believed in gravity. Daddy Leo tugged his hand again. "Why is the door closed? I thought we were surprising her." "We are," Marcus said, hearing how rough his own voice sounded. He cleared his throat, tried again. "We just don't want to interrupt if she's talking to someone important, okay? Grown-up work stuff." Leo's brow furrowed, but he nodded, trusting that whatever his father said was true. He shifted the bag he was half carrying and craned his neck, trying to see through the frosted glass. Marcus couldn't stop his own eyes from following. The glass blurred everything, but not enough. He could see two shapes close together. One taller, broad shoulders in a dress shirt, the other smaller, with the familiar sweep of Amelia's hair, even pinned up. They weren't standing across a desk. They were on the same side of it. The hallway tilted for a moment. Marcus steadied himself with a hand on the cool metal of the doorknob. It could still be nothing, he told himself, clinging to the thought like a rope. People stood close. Offices were cramped. Maybe she'd tripped. Maybe the laugh he'd heard was nervous, not that. Then another sound slipped to echo through the low, unmistakable curve of Amelia's laughter. It wasn't the tired, thin version she brought home at night. It was bright, sharp-edged. The laugh he remembered from the early days when everything between them had been new and electric. Only now, it wasn't for him. His chest tightened, a slow, crushing pressure. He pictured himself flinging the door open, dragging the truth into the light in one violent, irreversible moment. He saw Leo's drawing falling from his hand. Leo's small body going rigid. A scene that would replay behind his son's eyes for the rest of his life. He couldn't do it. Not like that. Not with Leo here. Marcus forced his fingers to relax on the doorknob. He bent down until he was eye level with his son, ignoring the way his knees suddenly felt weak. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "I've got an idea. How about we leave her lunch right here so she finds it when she comes out? It'll be like a secret surprise." Leo blinked. "We're not going to say hi." "Not this time," Marcus replied, hating how calm he sounded. "She might be in a really important meeting. But if we leave it for her, she'll still know we came. She'll see your drawing first thing. That's pretty special, don't you think?" The disappointment was unmistakable, but Leo swallowed it the way only children determined to be brave can. "Can I put the card on top?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "You should." Together they crouched in front of the door. Marcus set the bag carefully on the floor, adjusting it so it wouldn't tip. Leo unfolded his drawing with both hands, smoothing out the worst of the creases, then laid it gently over the top. Something bumped inside the office again. A muffled giggle followed, cut off halfway, as if someone had remembered there was a world outside that door. Marcus's jaw tightened until it hurt. He laid the sunflowers across the bag, their bright faces turned up toward the indifferent ceiling. "Will she be happy?" Leo asked, looking up at him. He had to take a breath before he could answer. "She'll know we love her," he said. "That's what this is, love." The words tasted strange, like something that had sat out too long in the sun. He straightened his legs stiff. The hallway felt colder now, smaller. He took Leo's hand again, curling his fingers around that small, warm palm like it was the only solid thing left in his world. "Come on," he said. "Let's go get our own lunch. Just you and me. Secret mission. You in." At the word mission, Leo's eyes lit up again. "Like spies, yeah?" Marcus said, forcing out a laugh that sounded thin in his own ears. "Like spies." As they walked away, Leo looked back, once memorizing the door with his mother's name on it and the little pile of offerings at its base. Marcus didn't look back at all. He couldn't. If he did, he wasn't sure whether he'd march in or fall apart. With every step, the first tiny crack inside him widened. Suspicion slid through cold and steady. What exactly was Amelia doing when she thought no one was watching? How long had this been going on? How much of his life was built on things that weren't true? He didn't have any answers yet. Only sound shadows behind frosted glass and a sudden terrifying sense that he had just walked out of the life he thought he knew and into something different altogether. By the time they stepped into the bright afternoon, the sunlight felt harsher, like a spotlight he couldn't step out of. Leo chattered about ketchup packets and extra fries. Marcus nodded in the right places, but his mind stayed in that hallway, standing outside a door he hadn't opened. One thing settled in his chest, alongside the hurt he needed more than a feeling. He needed proof. If he was going to protect his son, if he was going to decide what to do with the years he'd given so freely, He needed the truth laid bare, not just a laugh behind a door. And that quiet decision to start watching, listening, gathering answers was the first step into a story much bigger than a ruined lunch break. Before we follow Marcus deeper into that story, take a moment to check in with yourself. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Right now, drop your location and local time in the comments. And if you want to see how Marcus uncovers the truth, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Marcus woke before dawn the next morning, long before his alarm buzzed against the nightstand. Sleep had come in fragments, thin, sharp pieces that never settled, never soothed. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that laugh again, the one from behind Amelia's office door. Not her tired laugh, not her forced polite one, but the bright, unguarded sound she once used to give only to him. He stared at the ceiling for a long time, letting the room sharpen around him in the early gray light. Their bedroom was exactly what he had worked years to give her: calm, clean, soft. The walls were painted a warm cream she chose. The nightstands matched because he built them to match. Even their mattress was something he had saved 3 months for, so she would stop waking with back pain. But lying there now, everything felt foreign. He felt like a guest in the life he had built. Beside him, Amelia slept, facing away, her hair fanned across her pillow. She hadn't stirred when he came in last night. She hadn't noticed his silence. If anything, she had seemed relieved he didn't try to talk. She had showered quickly, claiming exhaustion, and slid into bed without touching him. Not even the casual brush of a hand she used to offer without thinking. The lavender scent of her shampoo had filled the room, but even that smelled less like comfort today and more like distance. He turned onto his side, studying her silhouette in the faint light. There was a time when watching her breathe had been one of the quiet joys of his life. Now he only felt the numb ache of someone looking at a memory wearing a real body. He slipped out of bed, carefully avoiding the creaky floorboard near the closet. Reflex. He'd always tried not to wake her. He moved through the hallway past Leo's door that was cracked open. A soft snore drifted out, the kind only kids with full trust in the world made. He paused there, letting the sound anchor him. Whatever storm was coming, Leo was the one fixed point, the one thing he had to protect above everything else. In the kitchen, the morning air felt different, hollow, as if the house itself sensed something was off. Marcus set water to boil for coffee, then leaned on the counter, palms flat, eyes closed. He tried to breathe deeply, but each inhale carried flashes of yesterday, the thud against the desk. Amelia's muffled laugh, the man's voice whispering too close. He wanted to be wrong. God, he wanted that more than anything. But the heaviness in his chest said otherwise. He set himself to motion. Habit was the only thing that kept him steady. He cracked eggs into a pan, sliced fruit, toasted bread. He plated breakfast the way he always did, neatly, the pieces arranged so Amelia wouldn't have to think when she finally came downstairs. It was the small things that had held their marriage together all these years. Small things he had assumed mattered to her too. Leo shuffled into the kitchen, wearing dinosaur pajamas, one sleeve twisted from sleep. His hair stuck up in all directions. "Morning, buddy," Marcus said softly. Leo rubbed his eyes. "Is it school day?" "Yeah. Want pancakes or eggs?" "Eggs," Leo mumbled, climbing into his usual chair, the one Marcus had sanded smooth after Leo complained the edge felt pokey. As Leo ate, Marcus watched him carefully, taking in every innocent detail. He wondered how much Leo sensed how much children absorbed without words. Last night, Leo hadn't asked about Mommy's lunch or the card he'd made. That alone said something. "Daddy," Leo said suddenly, mouthful of strawberries. "Why didn't we see Mommy yesterday?" Marcus swallowed. His throat felt too tight. "She was busy, remember, work meeting." Leo frowned. "But I heard her laughing." He froze. Not visibly, he forced his face to stay calm, but inside every muscle tightened. "You did when we were outside the door." Leo poked at a piece of toast. It sounded like when she watches funny videos, but different. There it was. The thing Marcus had been trying to shield him from. Children always saw more than adults wanted them to. Sometimes grown-ups laugh at work, Marcus said quietly. Doesn't mean anything bad. Leo nodded slowly, accepting the answer because it came from him. But the question lingered in his eyes. Marcus felt its weight settle on him like another stone in an already heavy pile. When Amelia finally came downstairs, her hair tied neatly, makeup immaculate, she looked like a polished version of someone he used to know. She kissed Leo on the forehead, murmuring "morning, sweetheart," but her eyes slid past Marcus as if he were part of the furniture. "You're up early," she said. Not warm, not curious, just stating it. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. She reached for coffee, not noticing or pretending not to notice the hesitation in his voice. "Busy day," she said. "Meetings back to back. Might not be home until late again." Leo perked up. "Can we bring you dinner?" Marcus's heart ached. Amelia didn't even smile, just shook her head too quickly. "No, honey, it's not a good idea." "Really?" Leo looked down. Marcus watched her carefully, taking in every micro-expression. The avoidance, the stiffness, the slight tremor in her hand when she picked up her bag. "Did you like your lunch yesterday?" he asked, suddenly voice mild. Amelia froze. Not long, barely a heartbeat, but enough. "Oh," she said lightly. "Yes, I ate during a meeting. Forgot to text you. Sorry." He knew she was lying. She knew she was lying. But she gave him the smile she used on coworkers, the one that meant, "Let's not talk about this." She kissed Leo again, ignored Marcus entirely, and left. The door shut behind her with a soft, final click. Leo looked up. "Daddy, are you sad?" Marcus crouched and gathered him into a tight hug. "No, buddy, just thinking." But he was sad. He was confused. He was angry. Most of all, he felt something shifting inside him. A slow awakening to the possibility that the life he'd been protecting so fiercely wasn't the one he thought he had. After dropping Leo at school, Marcus sat in the truck for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. He replayed Amelia's expression, the tremor in her voice, the too casual explanations. He mentally rewound every odd moment from the last few months, the late nights, the phone turned face down, the sudden interest in appearances, the unexplained receipts. The signs had been whispering to him. Yesterday, they had finally screamed. He needed answers. He needed truth, not confrontation. Not yet. Truth. The house felt too quiet when he returned, too big for one person's thoughts. He wandered through it slowly, touching the back of the couch, where Amelia used to curl up against him, pausing by the framed pictures on the wall. Their wedding photo. Leo's first steps, Amelia's graduation gown. Each memory felt like a bruise now. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where Amelia used to write late-night emails. He took a breath, steadying himself, then opened his laptop. The screen blinked awake, and for the first time in their marriage, Marcus typed in a search not for something to build, repair, or learn, but for something to uncover. He hesitated, feeling guilt twist in his stomach. But guilt was a luxury he could no longer afford. He started checking shared accounts, small things at first. Calendar entries, bank statements, work schedules, patterns, discrepancies. And as he dug, a picture began to form. Not clear yet, not complete, but enough to tell him one thing: yesterday was not an isolated moment. It was a window into something much larger, something that had been happening right in front of him while he was busy holding their family together. By noon, Marcus closed the laptop with trembling hands. His heart thudded painfully, but there was clarity in the pain now, sharp, focused, undeniable. Whatever story lay ahead of him, it had already started long before he opened that office door. And he was going to follow every thread until he unraveled the truth completely. Not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because Leo deserved a father who didn't look away from reality, no matter how much it hurt. Marcus stood, took a deep breath, and looked toward the front door. The day ahead felt heavier than any job he had ever carried. But for the first time, he felt something like resolve tighten his spine. He was going to find out what was happening. piece by piece, quietly, carefully. And when the truth finally stood before him, he would decide what to do next. But not blind, not broken, not this time. Marcus spent the next morning moving like a man walking through fog, slow, careful, unsure what was real, and what he only feared was real. Every noise felt sharper than usual. Every silence felt suspicious. He tried to focus on the routines that had always anchored him, packing Leo's school lunch, rinsing breakfast plates, tightening a loose screw on the drawer handle that had been bothering him for weeks. But underneath each task ran the same steady hum of dread he couldn't shut off. He kept seeing Amelia standing too close to that shadowy figure behind her office door, hearing the way she'd laughed, feeling again the way her eyes had avoided his last night, how she'd brushed off his questions like they were gnats. Annoyances too small to acknowledge. He needed to understand when everything had started slipping, and more importantly, why he hadn't seen it sooner. After dropping Leo off at school, he didn't go straight home. His hands seemed to steer the truck on their own, drifting through the quiet streets of Riverton, until he reached the riverbank, the place he used to sit when they were younger. The place he'd first told Amelia he loved her. The place she'd once told him she didn't need a big life, only him and whatever future they could build together. Funny how promises lose meaning over time, he thought bitterly. He sat there a long while, watching the slow current, the gulls dipping low over the water, the boats swaying lightly at their moorings. He didn't cry. He felt too hollow for tears. Instead, he sifted through memories, looking for the first fracture line in a marriage he'd believed was unbreakable. The long nights started first, then the new perfume, then the sudden defensiveness, the way her phone never left her hand. The new clothes she said were required for work, the way she stood in the doorway when he hugged her close, but not truly in his arms. And then the ultimate blow, Leo's quiet comment about seeing a man close the office door behind her during a video call. Every sign was a breadcrumb. He had simply refused to see the trail. He drove home when the morning sun lifted fully over Riverton. The house felt colder than usual when he stepped inside, as though something in its bones sensed the fracture forming in the family it sheltered. Marcus toed off his boots, walked into the living room, and sat heavily on the edge of the couch. He stared at the blank television screen for a long time, seeing nothing yet, thinking everything. He knew logically he shouldn't jump to conclusions. Logic demanded patience, demanded proof, demanded clarity before action. But his heart had already drawn its conclusions, and each one hurt worse than the last. Still, he wasn't the kind of man to accuse without evidence. He wouldn't confront Amelia with suspicion alone, not when Leo's entire world could be shattered by the wrong move. When his phone buzzed, he flinched. It was a message from Amelia Longday. "Don't wait for dinner. Eat with Leo. Love you." Once those words would have warmed him. Now they stabbed. She typed "love you" the way people write kind regards at the end of a business email, automatic, empty, expected. He typed back, "Okay. Hope your day's not too stressful." He didn't add anything more. If she noticed the lack of warmth, she didn't acknowledge it. He set his phone down and leaned back, rubbing his hands over his face. Then his gaze drifted to the laptop on the desk, the same laptop where he'd uncovered the first thin threads of doubt yesterday. Today he opened it again. Today he dug deeper. He began with her work calendar. No one protected their schedule as fiercely as Amelia, but she had once asked him to install a security update and given him her password. He'd never used it for anything beyond that day until now. Her calendar was a maze of meetings, deadlines, client presentations. But one name showed up more than others, Adrian Locke. There were meetings that didn't align with what she'd told him, off-site sessions that were suspiciously vague. One recurring entry simply labeled Project Review at a boutique hotel downtown. He clicked through the entries, feeling his stomach turn. She had been in that hotel more often than made sense for project reviews. And none of those dates matched the company events she'd mentioned at home. He moved on. Bank statements, credit card purchases. He wasn't looking for something specific, just something that felt wrong. He found it faster than he expected. charges at upscale restaurants he had never heard of. A jewelry store receipt small enough to fly under the radar, but too expensive to be an impulse buy. Bar tabs at a rooftop lounge in the city. Ride-share receipts between the office and that same hotel. His hands trembled. This wasn't paranoia. These were patterns. Patterns that pointed to someone else. Still, he needed to be sure. He opened the shared photo storage they hadn't updated in months. Amelia rarely used it now. She preferred saving photos on her work phone. But today, a few new images populated automatically screenshots she must not have noticed syncing. The first few were harmless mood boards campaign ideas. Then, a selfie. Amelia. Hair curled more elaborately than usual. Makeup heavier. A gold pendant he'd never seen. And behind her, not clearly but partially, a man's suit jacket hanging over a chair. Not Marcus's. Not any jacket he recognized. He zoomed in on the pendant, a delicate, expensive-looking piece. He checked the jewelry store charge again. The amount matched. He closed the photo pulse, hammering. He wasn't sure how long he sat like that, staring at the laptop. Time blurred heavy and thick, like it didn't want to move forward. The house stayed quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Life went on, indifferent to the way his own had shifted irreversibly. At noon, he finally stood. He needed air. He needed space. He needed clarity. He walked the neighborhood, slowly passing houses where families were starting their weekends early. He saw a father teaching his daughter to ride a bike, a couple laughing as they argued about which color to paint their porch, a group of teens tossing a basketball. Ordinary moments he once took for granted, but now felt painfully distant from. He sat on the curb across from Mrs. Calloway's house. The widow was tending to her roses again, she always did on Fridays. She waved him over. "You look like you're carrying a ghost on your shoulders," she said gently. He hesitated before walking over. She motioned for him to sit on the porch swing beside her. It creaked under their combined weight, familiar and comforting. He didn't tell her everything. He didn't need to. Mrs. Calloway had an uncanny way of understanding pain, even when it was wrapped in silence. Sometimes she murmured, trimming a wilted petal. People show you who they really are long before you're ready to see it. He breathed shakily. "I keep thinking I'm overreacting." "Are you?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. His silence was enough. She placed a warm hand over his. "Listen to me carefully, Marcus. Don't confront her until you know the whole story. And don't let her rewrite the parts you've already lived." Those words struck something deep in him. "You're not the kind of man who walks away without trying," she continued. "But you are the kind of man who deserves honesty. And so does that little boy of yours." Her voice cracked just slightly on the last words. He wondered, not for the first time, what ghosts she still carried from her own marriage. He left her porch with a steadying breath. The decision that had been forming in him since yesterday finally sharpened. He needed proof. Real proof. Not guesses, not fears, not shadows behind frosted glass. He needed the truth laid bare. As he headed home, the weight of what he was planning settled over him, but so did a strange sense of resolve. Whatever came next, he would face it with his eyes open. For Leo, for himself, for the man he refused to become broken without understanding why. He didn't know how deep the betrayal went yet, or how far he would have to follow its trail. But he would follow it. And that choice was the moment everything in his quiet world began to shift from suspicion into something darker, sharper, and far more dangerous. Marcus woke before the alarm again, though this time it wasn't anxiety that pulled him out of sleep. It was purpose. A quiet, steady purpose that hummed beneath his ribs like a low engine. It didn't make the pain any softer. If anything, it sharpened it. But at least he wasn't drifting in confusion anymore. He knew what he needed to do. Today wasn't about guessing or fearing. Today was about watching, listening, and confirming what his heart already suspected. He moved around the kitchen with a certain stillness, packing Leo's lunch, pouring cereal, slicing apples. His hands did what they had always done, but his mind wasn't here. It was at Horizon Bridge Marketing, standing outside Amelia's door again, hearing sounds that would haunt him forever. Leo padded into the kitchen, hair tangled, hugging his stuffed dinosaur under one arm. "Did you make the apple stars again?" he asked, squinting sleepily. Marcus smiled soft but tight. "Yeah, buddy. Thought you might want them today." Leo grinned, the simple delight of a child who still believed everything good would stay good. Marcus envied him that certainty. They ate breakfast together, Amelia's usual seat empty. She had left early again long before either of them woke. She'd left a note on the counter, "Important meeting. Might be late. Love you both." Leo accepted it without question. Marcus read between the lines. Or maybe he just read the truth behind them. After dropping Leo at school, he sat in the parking lot for a moment, engine running, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. His heart beat a little too fast, but not from fear. This was something else. A resolve he hadn't felt in a long time. He pulled out his phone and typed a text to Amelia Hope. "Your meeting goes well. Tried calling earlier, but you were already gone. Maybe I'll stop by for lunch again soon." It was a test, gentle, indirect, but still a test. Her response came 20 minutes later, short enough to expose the effortlessness of her lie. "Don't. Today's packed. I won't even be in my office." He stared at those words. Yesterday she said the same thing, "Don't come." And yesterday she had been very much in her office. He pocketed the phone, jaw tightening. No more pretending. He drove toward Horizon Bridge, the truck humming beneath him as he rehearsed what he would do. He wouldn't confront her, not yet. If he confronted her now, she would twist the truth, accuse him of distrust, maybe even flip the narrative until he was the villain. He'd seen enough friends destroyed by that tactic. He wasn't going to be one of them. He parked a block away from the sleek building, watching employees trickle in, men in button-down shirts, women in blazers, interns carrying coffees. A world Amelia now belonged to. A world that had slowly pushed Marcus to the outskirts of her life. He stepped inside the lobby, the polished floors reflecting the midday sun. The receptionist wasn't the same woman from yesterday. This one gave him a bright, professional smile. "Good morning, visiting someone?" "Just dropping something off for my wife," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Oh," she smiled politely. "Name Hale, Amelia Hale." The woman typed quickly, then said, "She checked in earlier. Should be somewhere on the 3rd floor. Not off-site. Not in a meeting elsewhere. Not traveling. Right here." He thanked the receptionist and stepped into the elevator, keeping his breathing steady as the doors slid shut. The ride felt too fast and too slow at the same time. His reflection stared back at him in the elevator's mirror-like surface, shoulders tense, jaw tight, eyes tired. The doors opened onto the 3rd floor. The hallway looked exactly as he remembered from yesterday. Quiet, bright, almost sterile. He walked slowly, pretending to look at the framed posters on the wall while scanning for movement. Just as he passed the row of offices leading to Amelia's, he saw someone he recognized, Priya, the young receptionist from the day before. She carried a stack of folders and nearly dropped them when she saw him. "Oh," she gasped. "Hi, you're Amelia's husband, right?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah. Sorry to bother you." "No, it's fine. I'm just surprised to see you again." She hesitated, glancing down the hall, then back at him. "Is everything okay?" He didn't lie, not directly. "I just wanted to see my wife. She said she wasn't in the office today, but I thought I'd check anyway." Priya's eyebrows pinched together in hesitation. She looked uncomfortable, as though she knew something but wasn't sure she should say it. "She is here," she said quietly. "I saw her come in about an hour ago." Marcus nodded, swallowing the sting. "Right." Priya shifted her folders, lowering her voice. "I don't want to get involved, but yesterday after you left the food well, it sat there a long time." "I figured," he said softly. "And I'm not saying anything happened inside," she added quickly, "but I heard people talking this morning." Something about her and she broke off abruptly as another employee walked by. Marcus didn't push. She had already said enough. He walked past Amelia's hallway again, but this time he didn't stop at her door. Instead, he veered left toward the break room where a cluster of employees chatted quietly over coffee. He heard it before he saw anything, voices lowered to gossiping tones. She and Adrian were in her office again, door closed. "It's like they don't even care anymore. They better be careful. HR's been watching him since that complaint last year. Girl Amelia's married. He's married. They're a mess waiting to happen." Marcus didn't breathe. His chest tightened as if ropes had been pulled around his ribs. He stepped back before anyone noticed him and returned to the main corridor. He didn't approach Amelia's door. He didn't want to repeat yesterday's torment. Instead, he moved toward the corner toward a panel marked Security. He didn't know exactly what he was hoping for. Some kind of access to the camera recordings, a glimpse of a truth too sharp to deny. Something solid. He could take away something that would replace the blur of suspicion with the sharpness of confirmation. But before he reached the door, a voice called quietly behind him. "Sir Marcus." He turned. Priya stood a few steps away, biting her lip. I thought about what you said yesterday," she whispered. "If you want to see the hallway footage from that day when you brought the lunch, I can show you. Just quickly. My supervisor is at a meeting." His throat tightened. "Are you sure?" Her expression softened with something like pity. "I don't think you deserve to be confused like this." She led him quietly into a small office behind the reception desk. A bank of monitors glowed softly. She tapped a few keys, and yesterday's footage filled the screen. Marcus braced himself. There he was, walking down the hall with Leo. The bag of food, the flowers. Leo bouncing at his side. He watched his own face, hopeful and nervous. He watched himself kneel to adjust the lunch bag on the floor. Watched himself take Leo's hand and lead him away. Then moments later, the office door opened. A man stepped out, tall, sharp suit, Adrian. He fixed his collar, buttoned his shirt, wiped something from his neck. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. Then Amelia stepped into view behind him, hair slightly mussed, cheeks flushed. She nudged the paper bag with her toe, sending it sliding a few inches, before turning away without picking it up. Marcus's heart broke not loudly, but in a quiet, irreversible crack. Priya touched his arm lightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded once, unable to speak. He recorded the footage with his phone, shaky hands but steady resolve. When he stepped outside into the parking lot, the sunlight hit him like a slap. He had proof now. Not suspicion, not imagination. Proof. The kind of truth that didn't give room for excuses or explanations. He sat in his truck for a long moment, resting his forehead on the steering wheel as everything inside him trembled. Love, grief, fury, disbelief, betrayal. So much betrayal. But beneath the wreckage of everything he thought he knew, another emotion flickered, a cold, controlled determination. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of the real story, the one where he stopped protecting the woman who shattered him and started protecting the son who depended on him. He lifted his head, wiped his face with the back of his hand, and started the engine. Nothing would be the same after today, and he was finally ready to face that truth. Marcus drove home in silence, the kind of silence that presses against the skull until it feels like something inside might fracture. The sunlight that once felt warm and predictable now cut across his windshield in harsh angles, making everything look a little too sharp, a little too real. Proof. He had proof, now proof of betrayal. Proof of deceit, proof that the life he thought he was living had already ended somewhere behind a frosted office door. He parked in front of the house and sat for a moment, hands locked around the steering wheel. The truck engine ticked softly as it cooled. A bird somewhere in a nearby tree chirped once, then fell silent, as if even nature could sense the heaviness in him. He replayed the scenes he'd captured on his phone. Not because he wanted to, but because his mind couldn't stop itself. The image of Adrian stepping out first, adjusting his shirt. Amelia following, her hair slightly disheveled. The way she nudged Leo's lunch with her toe, as if it were trash. As if the drawing Leo made something he'd poured love into meant nothing. That small, cruel gesture etched itself deeper than anything else. It wasn't the affair alone that broke Marcus. It was realizing she had grown callous toward the two people who had always held her heart. Or so he thought. When he finally stepped out of the truck, his legs felt heavy. His boots thudded against the pavement, echoing the rhythm of a man moving through the aftermath of an emotional collapse. He entered the house, closing the door softly behind him. He didn't slam it. He didn't yell. He didn't break anything. Rage would have been easier than this quiet devastation. He walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, then poured it out untouched. Everything tasted wrong today. He paced once, twice, then forced himself to sit at the table. There were things he needed to do, steps he needed to think through. If he confronted Amelia without a plan, she would twist everything. She had become good at that, lately turning small questions into accusations, turning his concern into controlling behavior. He needed clarity. He needed strategy. He needed time. His phone buzzed, startling him. A message from Amelia. "How's your day? Sorry again for yesterday. Things have been insane at work. Don't forget to pick up Leo at 3. Normal, casual, as though nothing in their world was cracked or bleeding. He read the message 3 times. Not once did she ask how he was. Not once did she acknowledge the lunch he'd left. Not once did she give him any reason to doubt what he'd seen. He typed a reply after a long pause. "I'll pick him up. Hope your meeting goes well." No mention of the footage. No hint of what he knew. Not yet. He deleted the period at the end of the sentence, retyped it, deleted it again. How strange that punctuation could feel like a lie. He hit send anyway. The next few hours passed slowly. Marcus attempted to distract himself by working in the garage, sanding a piece of cedar he'd been shaping into a cutting board for weeks. The repetitive motion usually soothed him, but today his hands shook too much, the sandpaper scraping unevenly over the wood. He set it aside before he ruined it. At 3 p.m., he drove to pick up Leo. Seeing his son waiting outside the school with his backpack crooked and his shoelaces untied softened something inside him. Leo spotted him and waved enthusiastically, running toward the truck with a bounce in his step. "Daddy," he shouted, "we had art today. I made a robot with glitter." Marcus forced a smile. A glitter robot? That sounds awesome. Leo talked nonstop on the drive home, describing the robot's laser hands and super strong rocket legs. Normally, Marcus would have asked questions, teased out every detail. Today, he simply nodded and listened, letting Leo's voice fill the spaces where his own thoughts grew too dark. Back home, Leo settled at the table to draw more robots, while Marcus reheated leftovers for dinner. Amelia still hadn't messaged again. She usually sent an update around 5. Today, nothing. As the minutes ticked by, a dull, throbbing anxiety settled in his chest. Was she with Adrian? Were they together right now? Laughing the way she used to laugh with him? He hated himself for imagining it. But he couldn't stop. At 6:43 p.m., Amelia walked through the front door. The moment Marcus saw her, his heart stuttered. She looked different. Her hair was too neat, her lipstick too perfect, her blouse too crisp for a woman who claimed to have had a grueling day. She paused when she spotted him in the kitchen, her smile too polished. "Hey," she said lightly, shrugging off her coat. "Sorry I'm late. Client meeting ran over." Her voice held no guilt, no remorse, no hesitation. Leo jumped up to hug her, and she bent down, embracing him with a softness Marcus hadn't seen in a while. "Hi, sweetheart," she murmured, kissing the top of his head. "Did you have a good day?" She didn't look at Marcus, not once, not even accidentally. He watched her closely, the way her shoulders remained slightly tense, the way she kept her hair tucked behind one ear, the way she avoided turning fully toward him. She was hiding something. She was afraid something would show. "Dinner's in the fridge," Marcus said. Even he heard the stiffness in his voice. "Thank you," she replied, still facing Leo. They didn't speak much through the evening. Leo filled the silence with stories and drawings, blissfully unaware of the tension tightening the air around the adults. Amelia pretended to listen, smiling, nodding, laughing at all the right moments, but every time Marcus looked at her, she looked away. Later, while Leo brushed his teeth, Marcus walked into the living room. Amelia was seated on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She straightened slightly when she heard him enter, but didn't look up. "Long day?" he asked. "Extremely," she said, still scrolling. "Meetings? Who were you meeting with?" She stiffened. "Barely, but enough. Marcus, I'm not in the mood for an interrogation." "I didn't ask you anything," he said quietly. "I just asked who you met with. I told you it was a client. Can we not do this?" He watched her carefully. "Do what?" "This," she snapped. "This suspicious tone. This hovering. It's exhausting. I'm doing my best at work and at home, and the last thing I need is to be questioned every time I walk through the door." He swallowed. The hypocrisy stung. "I wasn't questioning. I was asking. There's a difference." She stood abruptly. "I'm taking a shower." As she walked away, he noticed something that made his stomach drop, a faint red mark near her collarbone. Almost hidden. Almost. His hands curled into fists. Not with the urge to fight Adrian, though the image was tempting, but because the truth was now settling in his bones like cold iron. She wasn't going to admit anything. She wasn't going to confess. She was going to lie and lie until he stopped asking. But Marcus wasn't the same man he was yesterday. The truth was in his pocket in the form of video recordings and screenshots. It was undeniable. It was damning. And it was only the beginning. There was one more thing he needed to do before anything else. One more piece of the puzzle he had to collect. Something that would solidify everything he already knew and anchor him for the storm ahead. Tomorrow, he would return to Horizon Bridge. Not with hope, not with lunch, not with Leo's drawing. Tomorrow, he would return for the final confirmation of truth proof, so complete that not even Amelia could twist it. And once he had it, their lives would never be the same again. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling as shadows gently shifted across it with the passing of headlights outside. Amelia breathed steadily beside him, already asleep or pretending to be. He didn't know anymore. He didn't know what was real in this house or what was only performance. All he knew was this tomorrow had to give him something definitive. Something that answered the one question clawing at his chest. How long had she been gone from him? Not physically, but emotionally. How long had she been drifting out of their marriage while he kept trying to anchor them both? He slipped out of bed in silence and went to the kitchen. He sat at the table, fingers tracing the worn grain of the wood he sanded himself years ago. He remembered the day he built it. Amelia laughing as she splattered paint on the wall, pregnant belly round under her shirt. Saying she wanted a home that felt lived in, not showroom perfect. She used to want simplicity warmth. She used to want him. Somewhere along the way, she had traded that desire for something sharper, colder, and more dangerous. But Marcus knew better than to believe that betrayal happened overnight. It was a slow erosion, 1,000 tiny steps towards someone else. Today he would learn when that first step happened. When dawn came pale and cool, he made breakfast for Leo and packed his lunch. Amelia joined them, freshly showered, glowing with the kind of energy that made Marcus's stomach twist. Was she energized because her career was thriving, or because she had someone waiting for her behind a closed office door? "Morning," she said lightly, sitting at the table with her usual grace. Her eyes grazed over Marcus without lingering like he was part of the furniture. "Morning," he replied. Leo chattered about a science project due next week, and Amelia smiled though it didn't reach her eyes. Marcus watched her searching for any sign, any flicker of guilt or discomfort. But she carried herself like a woman who believed her secrets were safe. After dropping off Leo, Marcus didn't head home. He parked 2 blocks from Horizon Bridge again this time, not bothering to calm the storm inside him. That storm was the only thing keeping him focused. He walked the familiar path to the building's entrance. It was busier today, more employees clustered in the lobby, chatting, drinking coffee, scrolling through their phones. The receptionist from yesterday wasn't there, but it didn't matter. Marcus wasn't here to ask permission. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, stepping out into a corridor buzzing with mid-morning energy. Phones rang, printers hummed, laughter floated from the break room. It was unsettling to realize how normal everything seemed in this place, where his marriage had unraveled. When he approached Amelia's hallway, he slowed his pace. A man exited her office, someone he didn't recognize. Tall, slender, carrying a stack of files. He wasn't Adrian. He wasn't anyone suspicious. Just a co-worker. For a moment, Marcus felt foolish. Maybe today wasn't the day she met Adrian. Maybe she was actually working. Maybe. But then he saw it. A detail so small, he almost missed it. A men's jacket, navy blue, hanging on the coat hook inside her office. He recognized it. He had seen it yesterday on the hallway camera footage, Adrian's jacket. His breath caught in his throat. He waited until the coworker turned the corner, then stepped closer, not enough to draw attention, just enough to listen. Voices drifted from inside the office. Amelia's bright and smooth. And Adrian's lower tone so familiar now it sent a sickening chill down Marcus's spine. "You shouldn't have left it out where people walk by," Adrian murmured. "It's not a big deal," Amelia replied. "No one pays attention." "Someone might," Adrian warned lightly. "Your husband dropping by out of nowhere? That was risky." Marcus's gut twisted. Amelia laughed soft and dismissive. Marcus doesn't question things. He's comfortable, predictable. A pause. Then, as if twisting the knife, she added, "He doesn't really see me anymore." The words slammed into Marcus so hard, he had to lean against the wall for a moment to steady himself. He didn't see her. He who built her life with his bare hands. He who sacrificed his dreams so she could chase hers. He who adored her even as she drifted further away. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. Adrian said something quieter now, something Marcus couldn't make out. But Amelia's soft hum of agreement or pleasure was enough. His chest tightened painfully. He had thought yesterday was the worst it could get. He'd been wrong. Hearing betrayal was different from seeing it. Hearing her voice betray him, that cut deeper than anything he'd imagined. He needed to leave. He needed to get out before his emotions took over, and he did something that would destroy everything he was fighting to protect. He turned and collided with Priya. She gasped softly. "Marcus, are you okay? You look pale." He shook his head, unable to find words. Priya glanced toward Amelia's office, her expression tightening. "Is he in there again?" Marcus didn't answer. His silence was enough. Priya hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There's something else you should know. A few people here have noticed things, not just yesterday, not just today." He looked at her sharply. She swallowed nervously. "They've been close, for months, long before you came by with the lunch." The ground beneath him seemed to tilt. How long he managed. She hesitated before whispering, 6, maybe 7 months, maybe longer. "I don't know." His heart clenched, but he nodded, accepting the information with a numb kind of resignation. He had asked for the truth. It was here now, raw and unfiltered. Priya touched his arm gently. "I'm sorry. I wish I didn't have to tell you this." Marcus nodded again, barely hearing her now. The buzzing in his ears drowned out everything else. He left the building, his steps heavy, each one, feeling like he was dragging the weight of a crumbling marriage behind him. When he reached the truck, he sat with the door open, breathing in the cold air just to ground himself. 7 months. 7 months of lies. 7 months of secrets. 7 months of believing she was exhausted from work when she was giving herself to someone else. He leaned back against the seat, staring at the ceiling of the truck cab. He wasn't angry anymore, not the fiery rage he'd expected. What he felt now was quieter, deeper. The grief of a man finally accepting that the life he built had fallen apart long before he noticed the cracks. He opened his phone and replayed the hallway footage again. He forced himself to watch Amelia's expression as she stepped out behind Adrian. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't conflicted. She wasn't scared of being caught. She looked content, satisfied, comfortable in a world where Marcus no longer belonged. He closed the video slowly, his hands steady now. The truth was complete. He had everything he needed, not for vengeance, not for confrontation, but for clarity. He wiped a hand across his face and drew a long, steady breath. Tonight he wouldn't confront her. Tonight wasn't the right moment. But soon, very soon, he would begin the next step. Because the man he was yesterday died behind that frosted glass door. And the man he was becoming. He demanded honesty. He demanded respect. He demanded justice for what had been done to Leo and to himself. Marcus started the engine. The storm was coming, and he no longer feared it. Marcus pulled into the driveway with the strange steadiness of a man who had finally stopped hoping. There was a certain clarity that came when denial died. It was like sinking underwater for too long and finally breaking through the surface, not for air, but simply to understand you were drowning the whole time. He sat in the truck with the engine running, fingers tapping the steering wheel, replaying every conversation with Amelia over the last 7 months. Every late night, every vague explanation, every half-hearted smile. It all made sense now. Too much sense. He turned off the engine, stepped out and stood in the middle of the driveway with his hands in his pockets, staring at the house he once believed was built on love. The truth was harder to accept. The house had been standing on sinking sand for a long time. He had just been too loyal, too trusting, too hopeful to feel it sliding beneath him. Inside the house carried the familiar hum of ordinary life. The refrigerator buzzed softly. A clock ticked in the living room. The air smelled faintly of the cinnamon candle Amelia lit last night, the one she claimed helped her unwind. Funny how the scent that once felt warm now wrapped itself around him like a lie. Marcus walked into the living room and sank onto the couch. He set his phone on the coffee table and stared at it. His entire world now lived inside that device, screenshots, photos, a video from the office hallway. Proof he never wanted. Proof he wouldn't have believed 6 months ago. Proof he now clung to like armor. But even with everything he'd seen and heard, one question ate at him. How deep did the betrayal go? Was it emotional at first, physical only recently? Or had it always been both? He needed more clarity. And clarity meant digging further, even into places that made him feel sick to his stomach. Around noon, he opened Amelia's laptop. She often left it in the living room when working from home. It was technically hers, but purchased with their joint account. He hesitated only a moment before flipping it open. The screen blinked awake, welcoming him with a password prompt. He typed the password he remembered. It worked. A strange, painful thing happened, then relief and heartbreak washing through him in one wave. She hadn't changed the password. Did that mean she trusted him, or did it mean she assumed he would never question her? He navigated through her folders, carefully forcing himself to breathe evenly. At first, everything looked normal: presentation decks, spreadsheets, marketing briefs. He skimmed through them without absorbing much. These weren't what he was looking for. He checked recent downloads, recent emails, Chrome history. Meeting notes and schedules matched the hotel entries he'd already found on the shared calendar. That overlap sharpened his certainty she had been lying to him for months, with the ease of someone who had practiced. Then he opened a folder labeled Campaign Assets. Inside were subfolders named after clients. But there was one folder out of place, no name, just a date. A date from 4 months ago. His pulse quickened. He clicked it. Inside were photos, dozens of them. At first glance, they looked like casual shots from a work event. Amelia at a rooftop bar, Amelia at a dinner table. Amelia laughing with co-workers. But then there were others. Amelia next to Adrian, closer than co-workers ever should be. Amelia with her hand on his arm. Amelia staring at him the way she once stared at Marcus, eyes lit with admiration, excitement, longing. Marcus closed the laptop abruptly, breath knocked from his lungs. He pressed the heels of his hands to his eyes, forcing back the burn of tears he refused to shed in the middle of the day. He felt foolish, humiliated, devastated. And more than anything, he felt angry. Not the explosive anger that made men break things. A quieter, colder anger, one that settled deep and promised not to fade. He stood abruptly, pacing the length of the living room. He had never been the jealous type, never felt insecure about Amelia's success or her world of polished executives. He always believed that no matter how far she climbed, she would still come home to him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. But she had left him long before she physically walked away. She'd left him in her heart, in her desires, in her dreams. And he had let her go without realizing it. He heard a small tapping at the window and turned. Mrs. Calloway stood on her porch next door, waving gently, her brows pinched with concern. Marcus walked outside to meet her. "You look like you saw something you shouldn't have," she said softly. Marcus gave a bitter half-smile. "I think I saw everything I needed to." She sighed, her face softening with empathy. "Some truths break us before they set us free." Marcus stared at the ground. "I don't even know where to start." "You start," she said, "by understanding that none of this is your fault. A person who wants to betray you will betray you no matter how good you are to them." He felt that sentence cut straight through him. Then, because she had always been blunt in the ways he needed, she added, "And you don't confront a liar without the full story. They'll twist the half-truth you bring them into a weapon against you." He nodded slowly. "That's why I'm trying to get everything clear, every detail." Mrs. Calloway's gaze softened. "Good. Because you'll need a clear mind in the storm ahead. And a strategy. You're a builder, Marcus. You fix things. But some things aren't meant to be fixed. Some things are meant to be walked away from with dignity." He swallowed hard. When he returned inside, he sat on the couch again and opened the laptop a second time. It was harder now, his hands trembled slightly. But he forced himself to keep digging. Emails, shared documents, old messages. He discovered hotel receipts sent to her company email meetings logged as client strategy dinners that matched the same restaurants he'd found on their bank statements. He found a message chain where she told a coworker that Marcus had no ambition, that she felt trapped in a domestic life she'd never asked for. That last part hit him hardest. She had asked for that life. Every step of it. She had wanted the house, the child, the stability. At least she once had. He kept scrolling. Finally, he found the confirmation he wasn't prepared for. An email drafted, but unsent, written by Amelia only a week ago. "Sometimes I think I made a mistake marrying so young. Marcus is a good man, but he doesn't understand the world I'm in now. I feel like I've outgrown him, and I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I wish he would see that maybe this isn't working anymore." Marcus leaned back, stunned. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't even just emotional abandonment. It was contempt, disdain. She didn't love him. She didn't respect him. She didn't even want the life they had built. And she had been preparing herself to leave him long before he stepped into her office hallway with Leo. He slammed the laptop shut, chest tight. He walked to the window and braced his hands on the sill, staring out at the quiet street that had once felt safe. A soft breeze rustled the trees. A jogger passed. A neighbor watered their garden. Life went on, oblivious to the apocalypse unfolding inside him. When he picked up his phone, his hand steadied with purpose. He wrote a message. Not to Amelia, to someone else. "I need your help. It's urgent." A moment later, the reply came. "Of course, tell me what you need." It was from Connor Briggs, the attorney he'd spoken to briefly weeks ago about unrelated paperwork. A man who specialized in family law. Marcus exhaled a slow, controlled breath. Everything was clearer now. Everything was aligning. He had proof. He had motive. He had reason. And most importantly, he had a plan forming. Not for revenge, but for protection. Protection of Leo. Protection of himself. Protection of the truth. Because the truth was no longer fragile. It was a weapon. and Marcus, for the first time, was ready to use it. The next morning broke with a thin gray light that barely pushed through the blinds, leaving the house in a soft half-darkness. Marcus sat at the kitchen table long before anyone else woke, hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. He didn't drink it, he only held it to feel something warm, something real, while everything else in his life felt hollowed out and unreal. His phone buzzed once. A message from Connor Briggs. "Call me when you're ready. I reviewed the materials you sent." Materials. As if the shattering of a marriage could be reduced to digital materials. But Marcus understood Connor was a lawyer. Facts were his language. Evidence was his currency. And Marcus had provided more than enough of both. He typed back, "Later today. Thank you." He didn't want to talk yet. Not until he pieced together the rest of the truth. There were still gaps, still shadows where details hid. He needed the full picture before he took any official steps. When Leo padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, Marcus forced himself to smile. "Morning, buddy." "Morning," Leo yawned. "Are we making pancakes?" "Not today. Cereal, okay?" Leo nodded, climbing onto his chair. As Marcus poured the cereal, he caught his reflection in the microwave door. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw clenched a little too tight. He looked like a man older than 32, a man who'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. He wondered whether Leo noticed. Kids were intuitive in ways adults like to pretend they weren't. Leo had already shown signs, asking why Mommy didn't come home earlier, why she seemed too tired to play, why she didn't laugh the same way she used to. Daddy, Leo said suddenly, mouthful of cereal, "Can we have Mommy time today? Like, all three of us?" The question punched Marcus right in the chest. He kept his voice calm. "We'll see what her day looks like, okay?" Leo nodded slowly, accepting the soft lie. Amelia came downstairs 20 minutes later, dressed sharply in a fitted blazer and blouse that probably cost more than Marcus made in a week. Her hair was styled tightly, her makeup flawless. She smelled expensive, like perfume, layered over guilt, though she'd never admit it. "Morning," she said lightly. To Leo, she offered a kiss on the cheek. To Marcus, nothing but a glance. She poured herself coffee and grabbed her keys. "I have an early call. I'll be home late again." Marcus tried to read her face, searching for shame, hesitation, anything. But she moved with the ease of someone living two separate lives, and he suddenly realized she no longer felt guilty, because she no longer considered him part of her world. He didn't ask where she was going. He didn't press. He simply watched her leave the door, clicking shut behind her, like a punctuation mark. On the end of a chapter neither of them had acknowledged was over. After dropping Leo at school, Marcus sat in the truck staring at the steering wheel. Yesterday, he dug through Amelia's laptop. Today, he would take the next step, the one he had been avoiding. He drove back to Horizon Bridge, not aimlessly this time, but with purpose sharp enough to cut. He parked in a nearby lot and approached the building slowly. Employees streamed in with coffees and laptops, chatting about campaigns and deadlines. None of them knew the truth unfolding between these walls. None of them knew that this place had become the epicenter of the most painful betrayal of his life. He stepped inside. Priya wasn't at the front desk today. Good. He didn't want her caught in the crossfire of whatever he was doing. He rode the elevator to the third floor, stepping into the hallway where everything had begun to crumble. He paused outside Amelia's office from a distance not close enough to be seen through the frosted glass, but close enough to hear. Silence. No voices. No movement. She wasn't inside. A passing intern glanced at him and smiled politely. "Can I help you find someone?" "No thanks," Marcus said. "Just waiting." And he did wait. 10 minutes. Then 15. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for, maybe the courage to keep going. Maybe the perfect moment to approach someone who knew more than they were saying. Eventually, he walked toward the break room. A few employees gathered around the coffee machine, talking quietly, but not quietly enough. I swear, if HR doesn't do something about Adrian. Are you kidding? They've already had to talk to him once. Remember what happened to that intern last year? Well, Amelia doesn't look like she's complaining. Of course she's not. Why would she? He treats her like she hung the moon, and she eats it up. A knowing laugh. Poor husband, though. I saw him here the other day. He looked like a puppy waiting for his owner. Marcus felt heat flood his face, not embarrassment, rage, but he didn't move. He needed to hear more. Honestly, one of the women whispered, if my husband showed up with lunch and flowers and I was doing what she's doing, I don't think I could live with myself. Well, she clearly can. Another voice chimed in. They were in her office again this morning. Door closed. He was leaning over her desk like, well, you know how he gets. Laughter. Soft, pitying laughter. Marcus stepped back before he made a scene. His hands trembled with the effort not to punch the nearest wall. He didn't understand this version of Amelia. The woman they described, a woman who mocked her husband, who flaunted an affair at work, who carried herself like promises, meant nothing, felt like a stranger. He walked toward the far end of the hallway, where a glass-paneled door led to a stairwell. He needed air. He needed space. As he pushed the door open, he noticed someone sitting on the stairs, knees pulled up, head in hands. It was Elena Locke, Adrian's wife. The sight of her stole Marcus's breath. He recognized her from the company website, a poised, elegant woman with intelligent eyes. But today she looked exhausted. Grief clung to her shoulders like a heavy coat. She lifted her head, and for a moment, her expression flickered with embarrassment, like she'd been caught in a vulnerable moment. But when her eyes focused on Marcus, something changed. Recognition, understanding. You're Marcus, right? She asked softly. He nodded, throat tight. She gave a hollow smile. I thought so. I've seen your picture in Amelia's office, back when she still kept pictures. The ache in his chest deepened. Are you okay? He asked quietly, though he knew the answer. Elena laughed, broken and quiet, not even close. Her eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. I found messages between Adrian and your wife. Marcus swallowed hard. I found some things too. Silence settled between them, a heavy, painful silence built of shared betrayal. Elena, he said. Finally, how long? 8 months, she whispered. Maybe more. I kept ignoring the signs. He said I was imagining it. Gaslighting 101. She let out a bitter chuckle. I suppose we both tried too hard to believe in people who stopped believing in us. Marcus sat beside her on the step. For the first time since this nightmare began, he didn't feel alone. I don't know what to do next, he admitted. You find the truth, she said quietly. All of it. Even the parts that hurt, because once you have the full truth, they can't twist it anymore. And then you decide who you want to be after this. He stared at her, this woman who had been blindsided just as brutally as he had. She wasn't angry, not in the way he expected. She was resolute, steady. Thank you, he murmured. She nodded. Whatever you do next, don't do it blindly. Plan. Protect your son. Protect yourself. He stood slowly, the weight on his shoulders shifting into something more focused, more determined. He would gather everything, not for revenge, not even for closure, but for justice, and for Leo. When he left Horizon Bridge that afternoon, Marcus wasn't the same man who had walked in. The sorrow was still there, but something stronger had started to grow around it, a shell of certainty, purpose, strategy. He now understood the full gravity of what had been taken from him. And he understood exactly what he had to do next. Marcus drove home on autopilot, the conversation with Elena replaying in fragments that stabbed deeper every time his mind circled back to them. 8 months. Not 6. Not a few mistakes. 8 months of deliberate deception. 8 months of Amelia stepping further and further away from him, while he kept trying to close a distance she no longer wanted closed. As he pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same, quiet, peaceful, harmless. But he no longer believed in that illusion. The betrayal that lived inside those walls terrified him more than anything outside them ever could. He walked inside, dropped his keys on the counter, and sank heavily onto the couch. The silence felt like a second skin now clinging to him in a way that made it difficult to breathe. He reached for his phone and replayed the hallway footage again, dragging his eyes through the same agony he'd already endured. But this time, he noticed something new timing. Adrian left the office exactly 2 minutes before Amelia. 2 minutes. Enough time for her to compose herself, fix her hair steady, her breathing. Enough time for her to step back into the role of devoted wife and mother. He scrubbed a hand over his face. He had to know more. He had to know everything. His phone buzzed. A message from Connor. Call when ready. We can begin building your case. Case. The word made Marcus's stomach twist. Not because it was wrong, but because it was real. This was no longer about hurt feelings or suspicions. This was about custody protection consequences. But before he called Connor, he needed one more piece. One more angle. The hallway camera wasn't enough. The photos weren't enough. The messages weren't enough. He needed to know if this affair was happening only in that office, or if there were other layers to the betrayal. He stood abruptly. He knew what he had to do. He grabbed his jacket and keys and headed out again, this time driving not toward Horizon Bridge, but toward the Riverlight Hotel. The place Amelia's calendar kept pointing to, the place his gut told him held answers too painful to consider, but too important to ignore. The hotel lobby was quiet in the afternoon lull, the marble floors gleaming under soft yellow lights. Marcus approached the front desk, heart pounding but voice steady. "Hi," he said. "My wife had a meeting here earlier this week, and she mentioned leaving something behind. I'm trying to figure out which conference room she booked. Her name is Amal." He paused. He couldn't say her name, not without choking on it. "Hale," he finished. "Amelia Hale." The receptionist typed quickly, scanning her screen. Let me see. Ah, yes. She's been here several times, usually for short meetings in our private lounge spaces. Did you want to check Lost and Found? Marcus kept his voice calm. Actually, I'm trying to confirm which room she used. She said there were 2 booked back-to-back, and she might have mixed something up. The receptionist nodded sympathetically. "No problem. Looks like she regularly reserved Lounge Suite B on the 3rd floor. Those sessions were billed under Adrian Locke." Marcus's vision went white for a second. He gripped the counter to steady himself. "Is everything okay, sir?" the receptionist asked gently. He forced a breath. "Yes. Thank you." As he walked away, the truth solidified in a way it hadn't before. This wasn't impulsive. It wasn't accidental. This was coordinated, repeated, practiced. A second life they'd carved together at hotels, not offices. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, stepping out into a hallway lined with dark wood paneling and subtle gold accents. Lounge Suite B stood at the end, just a door, yet somehow heavier than any door he had ever faced. He reached for the handle, though he knew it would be locked. It didn't matter. Simply standing here was enough to send the full picture crashing into place. He imagined Amelia laughing inside this room, moving easily in a space where she wasn't Marcus's wife, where she wasn't Leo's mother, where she was someone else entirely. Someone who chose excitement over commitment, deceit over loyalty, betrayal over love. A cleaning cart approached, wheels squeaking softly. The housekeeper looked at him curiously. "Sir, you're looking for someone?" "No," Marcus said, stepping back from the door. "Just remembering something." She nodded politely and continued down the hall. Marcus walked back to the elevators, not trusting his legs to stay steady much longer. He pressed the button, hands shaking now with the rage he'd been suppressing all day. Not loud rage, silent rage. Cold rage. The kind that burned without making a sound. When he reached the lobby, he stepped outside to the fresh air, inhaling deeply. He needed to ground himself before he faced Leo, before he faced whatever came next. He drove to the school just in time for pickup. Leo ran to him with the same unguarded joy. He always had arms spread wide. Marcus knelt, scooping him into a hug that lasted a little too long. Daddy Leo giggled. "You're squeezing me, sorry, buddy." Marcus kissed the top of his head. "Just missed you." "Were you sad today?" Leo asked candidly. Marcus froze. Children always saw more than adults wanted them to. I'm okay, Marcus said softly, but thank you for asking. They drove home, Leo chatting about dinosaurs and field trips, his innocence a shield Marcus clung to. When they walked in, the house felt even emptier than it had an hour earlier. Marcus helped with homework, prepared dinner, laughed at Leo's jokes. He did everything a father should do. He did everything a family man does. But inside, he was unraveling and solidifying at the same time. Breaking and hardening, hurting and awakening. By the time Amelia got home, Leo was already asleep. She walked in wearing a blouse Marcus didn't recognize, a necklace he'd never seen before. She gave him a half-hearted smile. Long day, she said. Marcus studied her, not her clothes or her makeup, but her eyes. And what he saw there chilled him. Not guilt, not remorse, distance, detachment. A woman halfway out the door. How was your meeting? He asked, quietly testing. She didn't flinch. Fine, productive. He didn't tell her he knew she wasn't in a meeting. He didn't tell her he knew where she'd been. He didn't tell her he'd stood outside Lounge Suite B with her betrayal echoing through the walls. He simply nodded. Good. She went upstairs to shower, humming softly like nothing in the world had shifted. Marcus sat alone on the couch, again phone in hand. He opened the videos, the photos, the messages. He watched each piece of evidence one more time, not to feel pain, but to feel resolve. Then he typed a message to Connor, I'm ready to meet, tomorrow morning. Connor replied almost instantly, understood. Bring everything. We'll take it from there. Marcus stared at the screen. Everything. That included the truth he had gathered. That included the truth he'd heard. That included the truth he now lived. He stood, walked upstairs, and paused outside the bedroom. He could hear Amelia humming behind the door, unaware that her husband, quiet, devoted Marcus, was disappearing. What remained was a man rising from the ashes of betrayal. A man no longer blinded by hope. A man preparing for war, not with violence, but with truth. Tomorrow, everything would begin. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Marcus woke before the sun again. But this time, there was no fog. No confusion, only purpose. Determination had replaced despair, and though the hurt remained, it no longer ruled him. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake Amelia. She lay on her side, facing away from him, breathing softly, a strand of hair curled over her cheek. It hit him then, an absurd, painful truth. She looked peaceful, peaceful. While he lay awake night after night, carrying the weight of a life she had already abandoned. He stood there for a moment, studying her silhouette, wondering whether she ever thought about what she was destroying, or whether the fantasy she lived with Adrian had already swallowed the life they built. But dwelling on that question would only weaken him. Today wasn't about emotion. Today was about clarity, preparation, strategy. He slipped out of the room, brewed a pot of coffee he didn't drink, wrote a note for Leo's lunchbox, and waited for the house to stir awake. Leo woke first. Daddy, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes as he shuffled into the kitchen. Why are you dressed like you're going somewhere? I have an appointment this morning, Marcus said gently. But I'll be here when you get home. Leo nodded, accepting the answer like children do, trusting without question. He climbed onto the chair and began eating the cereal Marcus had prepared. Amelia didn't come downstairs until nearly 20 minutes later, dressed perfectly expression neutral but polished, as though she were stepping into a world that did not include her family. She offered Leo a bright smile, offered Marcus a fleeting one that never reached her eyes. I'll be home late again, she said casually, grabbing her travel mug. Marcus looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. Not accusingly, not angrily, just observing. And in that silence, something flickered across her face. A tiny spark of discomfort. Not guilt, not remorse. Something more defensive. Something that whispered she knew he was slipping away from her, but she didn't know why. Drive safe, he said simply. She blinked, thrown off by his calm tone, then hurried out the door. When Leo finished breakfast, Marcus tied his shoelaces, tousled his hair, and walked him to the truck. "Love you, Daddy," Leo said, hugging his neck. "Always," Marcus whispered, kissing the top of his head, more than anything. After dropping Leo at school, Marcus drove across town to Connor Briggs's office. The building was modern but small, the kind of place where the receptionist knew every client by name. When Marcus walked inside, she greeted him with a soft smile and pointed toward a glass door. "He's expecting you." Inside, Connor sat behind a sleek wooden desk, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on his nose. He stood when Marcus entered. "Morning," the lawyer said gently. "I saw your text. You brought the evidence." Marcus nodded and handed over a neatly organized folder, screenshots, printed receipts, copies of emails, and a USB drive containing the hallway footage. Connor skimmed through the materials with the detached focus of a seasoned professional, but even he paused at times, eyebrows tightening as he read certain messages. When he finally looked up, his expression had shifted, firmer now, analytical. "There's no ambiguity here," Connor said. "This is a long-term affair with a colleague conducted both on work premises and off-site. The hotel receipts alone are damning." Marcus exhaled slowly. "What happens next?" "Well," Connor said thoughtfully, "that depends on what your goals are. Do you want reconciliation, separation, custody arrangements?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, steady now, not shaking like they had been. "I need to protect my son. That's the only thing I'm sure of." Connor nodded. "Then here's our approach. First, you document everything. The videos, the emails, the hotel charges. This establishes a clear pattern of misconduct." Marcus nodded. "Second," Connor continued, "we need witnesses. Anyone who can attest to Amelia's behavior at work." "Priya," Marcus said quietly. "And Adrian's wife." Connor raised an eyebrow. "You've spoken to her?" "She found messages too," he replied. "Good," Connor said. "That strengthens your case. Third, you don't confront Amelia until we're ready. If you confront her now, she may destroy evidence, twist the narrative, or worse, frame the situation to paint you as unstable or controlling." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He hated how easily he could imagine Amelia doing exactly that. She'd already begun calling him an exhausting, suspicious hovering. It wouldn't be hard for her to portray herself as the victim. And finally, Connor said, "We move quietly. You gather more evidence. Secure your assets, protect yourself legally, then reveal everything at the right moment with witnesses present." Marcus hesitated. "I don't want to ruin her life." Connor studied him carefully. "She already ruined the marriage, Marcus. What you're doing is protecting your child." He nodded slowly. "Okay. What do you need me to do now?" "Go home," Connor said gently. "Act normal. Don't let her know anything has changed. When the time is right, I'll tell you exactly how to proceed." Marcus shook his hand firmly before leaving the office. On the drive home, he thought about Connor's words, "act normal." The irony of that struck him. For months, he'd been pretending everything was fine, while Amelia drifted further away. Now he had to pretend again, but this time he wasn't blind. This time, he was preparing for the moment she could no longer rewrite the truth. When he returned home, he saw a missed call from an unknown number. Then a text message, just a name, Elena. He called her back immediately. "Marcus," she answered softly. "I'm here," he said. "What's wrong?" Silence. Then I found more. His chest tightened. "More what emails?" she whispered. "Not between them. Between Adrian and another woman. A third one." Marcus closed his eyes, exhaling. The betrayal wasn't just deep, it was wide, far-reaching. Amelia hadn't fallen in love with a man. She had fallen into the arms of a predator dressed in a suit and tie. "Elena," he said quietly, "do you want to meet? Maybe talk through what we're dealing with?" "Yes," she breathed. "Please." They met that afternoon at a cafe tucked between office buildings. Elena looked as exhausted as he felt. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back hurriedly, hands trembling around her coffee cup. "He lied to both of us," she said, voice cracking. "He's been cheating on me for years. I found emails dating back to before we were even married." Marcus felt a pang of empathy so strong it nearly doubled him. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," she said, managing a weak smile. "But you should know something else." She pulled out her phone and opened a message. Amelia and Adrienne were planning a trip next month, a weekend getaway. I recognize the hotel. They've used it before. They weren't planning on telling either of us. Marcus's pulse steadied into something cold. "We're going to end this," he said firmly. "Both of us." Elena nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice, but giving them nowhere to hide. When he returned home, Leo ran to him immediately. Daddy, look, I drew us as superheroes." Marcus lifted the drawing, two figures caped, smiling, standing in front of a small house with stars around it. He swallowed past the tightness in his throat. "That's amazing," he whispered. "Are we superheroes for real?" Leo asked. Marcus knelt, cupping his son's small face. "We will be," he said softly. "I promise." Later that night, Amelia came home late again. She dropped her bag on the counter, walked past Marcus without a glance, and went straight upstairs. He watched her climb the stairs with the quiet awareness of a man watching the last thread of a life unravel. When she closed the bedroom door, he whispered into the stillness of the house, "It's almost time." Not a threat, not a plea, a promise to himself, to Leo, to the truth. And when the moment came when the truth was finally revealed, Amelia would learn the cost of betraying a man who had given her everything. The next days passed with a strange, chilling calm, the kind of calm that settles over the ocean before a storm devours the horizon. Marcus moved through each moment with a precision he didn't know he possessed. He woke early, made breakfast for Leo, exchanged small talk with Amelia, and maintained the facade of normalcy so flawlessly that even she didn't question it. At least, not at first. Inside, though, Marcus was calculating every step ahead of him, like a craftsman shaping the final piece of a long, grueling project. The betrayal had broken something in him, yes, but it had also awakened something he didn't expect: discipline. A fierce, controlled discipline that kept him from confronting her too soon, kept him from reacting with emotion instead of strategy. He spent the next few days gathering the final pieces of evidence. Connor had requested copies of phone records, a list of Amelia's business trips receipts from places she insisted she'd never been. He even found a spreadsheet she'd hastily minimized one night when he walked past her desk, a budget for a future relocation. The date column had upcoming months. The note beside it said, "Discuss with A after promotion." He stared at that document for a full minute without breathing. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning a life without him. Planning a life with him. The man who touched her in office hallways. The man who pressed against her desk. The man who whispered, "He won't know." Marcus sat back, heart beating the way it does right before a man falls. Not fast, just painfully, agonizingly slow. But he didn't crumble. He saved the file, printed it, and added it to the folder Connor was building for him. A thick folder now, heavy with truth and anger. Yet even with all of that, the worst moment came 3 days later. Marcus had picked up Leo early from school for a dentist appointment. They stopped at a small cafe afterward because Leo begged for a hot chocolate. Marcus agreed anything to bring some light into the boy's life. They sat by the window, Leo drawing in his notebook tongue, poking from the corner of his mouth in concentration. Marcus smiled softly. "What are you working on, buddy?" "A new superhero," Leo said proudly. "It's a dad who saves people from lies." Marcus's breath faltered. "That's a pretty powerful hero." "It's not a hero," Leo corrected. "It's you." Marcus looked away quickly, pretending to check his phone so Leo wouldn't see the emotion rising behind his eyes. That's when he saw a text message from an unknown number. "She's here again. Lounge Suite B. I thought you should know. E. Elena." Warning him. Marcus looked at Leo, who was sipping his hot chocolate with whipped cream smeared on his nose. No, he couldn't bring Leo into this. He couldn't carry him into the darkness Amelia had created. "Hey," Marcus said gently, "how about we go home after this and watch that dinosaur movie again?" Leo brightened immediately. Yes, yes, the one with the big T-Rex. Marcus forced a smile. That's the one. But inside, his chest had already gone cold. When they arrived home, he set Leo up with crayons, and cartoons kissed the boy's head and said, "I need to step out for a bit. Mrs. Calloway will watch you, okay?" Leo nodded, content in the haven of colors and dinosaurs. When Marcus dropped him off next door, Mrs. Calloway placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Do what you have to do," she said softly. "Your son is safe with me." Marcus drove to the hotel with a calm that frightened him. A calm so complete it felt like he'd stepped outside of his own body. The lobby was quiet again. Too quiet. Elevator music drifted lazily from the speakers, indifferent to the war inside his chest. He pressed the button for the third floor. The elevator doors closed, the numbers climbed. The doors opened. He walked down the hallway with long, steady strides. Lounge Suite B waited at the end like a final confession. He reached the door and stopped. Something inside him braced, tightened. Whispered, "Are you ready?" Before he could think, the door opened. Adrian stepped out first. Marcus didn't recognize the expression on the man's face, not until he realized it was arrogance. Pure, polished arrogance. The arrogance of someone who believed consequences were for other people, not for him. Behind Adrian, Amelia appeared, hair-messy blouse, half-buttoned lips, slightly flushed. She froze when she saw Marcus. Absolutely froze. Her pupils widened. Her mouth parted, her breath caught visibly in her throat. "Marcus, what are you?" she stammered. He didn't answer. He simply looked at her with the steady quiet of a man who had stopped breaking and started seeing clearly. She knew it too. The last flicker of color drained from her face. Adrian glanced between them, jaw tightening. "This is inappropriate," he snapped, as if Marcus had violated their privacy. Marcus slowly lifted his phone. His thumb hovered over the record button, not to capture this moment, but to show them he didn't need to anymore. He already had everything he needed. "I'm not here to argue," Marcus said calmly. His voice startled both of them. "I'm not here to yell or cause a scene." He stepped closer. Amelia instinctively stepped back. "I'm here for one thing." He held up the folder. "Truth." Amelia's eyes flickered to it and widened in fear. Marcus' continued voice. Steady, quiet, sharp. "I know everything. The hotels, the lies, the emails, the office, the calendar entries. Him." His eyes locked on Adrian. All of it. Silence. Thick, suffocating. Adrian straightened as though preparing for a confrontation, but Marcus didn't give him the satisfaction. "To both of you." Marcus said, his tone so soft it felt like a blade between ribs. "This ends now." Amelia's breath quickened. "Marcus, please no." He cut in, holding up a hand. "There's nothing left to explain. I don't want excuses. I don't want stories. I don't want promises you'll never keep." Her lip trembled. "I made a mistake." He smiled then, a sad, exhausted smile. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful during an argument. He stepped closer. 8 months is not a mistake. Amelia flinched. Adrian looked away. Marcus turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. "You should prepare yourselves," he said quietly, "because there will be consequences, legal ones, public ones." Amelia's voice broke. "Marcus, please, don't do this." He looked at her one last time. At the woman he once loved more than life itself. At the stranger standing in her skin. "I'm not the one who destroyed this marriage," he said softly. "You did." Then he walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The sound of Amelia breaking her sobbing, her voice shaking as she whispered his name, echoed faintly behind him, but it didn't stop him. It didn't even slow him. Marcus walked down the hall with a clarity so sharp it steadied every step. By the time he stepped into the elevator, he wasn't the man he had been yesterday. The betrayal no longer defined him. The pain no longer ruled him. Now he was something else. A man preparing for justice. A man reclaiming his life. A father protecting his child. As the elevator doors closed, Marcus whispered to himself, not as a threat, but as a vow. It's time. Marcus didn't remember driving home. The world outside the windshield was a blur of colors and motion, but none of it touched him. Not the lights, not the traffic, not the voices on the radio he forgot to turn off. His hands moved automatically on the wheel, steady despite everything. Inside, though, something monumental had shifted. Not broken, not shattered. Shifted, as if a massive weight that had been pressing on him finally tipped off center and began to fall away. He had confronted them. He had seen the truth in their eyes. He had spoken words that could never be unsaid. And he hadn't collapsed. He hadn't lost control. He hadn't become the version of himself he feared he might. Instead, he walked away with a calm born of absolute clarity. When he pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickered on in the early dusk. The house felt unnervingly still, as though holding its breath, sensing something in him had changed. Mrs. Calloway stepped outside before he even reached the front walk, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded once. "Thank you for watching, Leo." She studied him for a long moment, her keen eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw there made her exhale slowly, almost in relief. Good, good. You look steady." "I feel steady," he answered, surprised by how true the words were. "Leo's inside drawing," she said gently. "He's been waiting." Marcus thanked her again and stepped into the house. Leo looked up from the living room floor, crayons scattered everywhere, a big sheet of paper in front of him. "Daddy," he shouted, scrambling up and running over. "Look, I drew you another superhero." Marcus knelt and pulled him into a tight hug, breathing in the warm, sweet smell of crayons and childhood. "I love it already." Leo pulled back and held up the drawing. This one showed two figures, a tall one in blue Marcus and a smaller one in green Leo, standing side by side, both with shields. Over them, written in uneven letters, Team Hale. Marcus's throat tightened. He kissed Leo's forehead. This is perfect. For the rest of the evening, he stayed with Leo, helping him build a Lego dinosaur, reading a book twice, because Leo pretended he didn't hear it the first time, laughing at silly faces, pouring apple juice, soaking in every small moment that felt pure and untouched by the wreckage around them. Only after Leo fell asleep on the couch did Marcus allow his thoughts to turn back to Amelia. How would she come home tonight? Would she storm in furious? Would she come crawling with apologies? Would she pretend nothing happened? He didn't know. But for the first time, the uncertainty didn't scare him. When her car finally pulled into the driveway, it was nearly 11. Marcus heard the engine cut off, then silence. A long silence. He wondered if she was rehearsing excuses or apologies or defenses. He wondered if she was crying. When the door opened, Amelia stepped inside with caution, almost timidly. She looked smaller somehow. Hair tied back hastily, mascara smudged near the corner of one eye. "Marcus," she whispered, voice cracking. He didn't respond. He didn't rise from the chair where he sat, angled slightly away from her, watching Leo sleep instead. "Can we talk?" she asked after a moment. He turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. Her breath caught at the cold steadiness she saw there. For the first time, she looked truly afraid, not of him, but of losing the version of him she had always depended on, patient, forgiving, endlessly loyal. "What do you want to say?" Marcus asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I got lost. I made mistakes. Huge mistakes." He let her words float in the air, insufficient, shallow, late. "I'll end it," she continued quickly. "I swear, Marcus, I'll end everything with him. I already told him it's over. I came straight home because I needed to talk to you. I never wanted to hurt you, or Leo." Marcus breathed in deeply through his nose, steady and silent. "You didn't want to hurt us," he repeated, "but you did, repeatedly, for months." Her face crumpled. "I know. I'm so sorry." This isn't about apologies," he cut in quietly. "This is about reality." A tear fell down her cheek. Please, please don't give up on us. Marcus studied her face, not searching for truth, but recognizing the absence of it. Why do you want to save this marriage, Amelia? He asked. Because you regret what you did, or because you're afraid of losing the life I built for you? She flinched as if slapped. That's not fair. I'm done being fair, he said softly. I was fair for 12 years. You weren't. Silence fell heavy between them. Marcus, she whispered, stepping closer. I can fix this. No, he said, standing abruptly. You can't. Her breath hitched. Please not. Because forgiveness is impossible, he clarified. But because you're not the woman I married anymore. And I'm not the man who will let this continue. She reached out to touch him, but he stepped back. The gesture broke something in her. It showed in the way her shoulders collapsed and the way her voice cracked. What do you want me to do? She whispered desperately. Nothing, he said. Go upstairs. We'll talk tomorrow. Not as husband and wife, but as co-parents. She covered her mouth with a trembling hand, stifling a sob. Marcus. He didn't answer. He just turned back to Leo, brushing the boy's curls gently from his forehead, grounding himself in the only thing that truly mattered. Amelia stood there for a long moment waiting for something, anything that would give her hope. But Marcus didn't look at her again. Eventually she went upstairs, her footsteps quiet and uneven. When the bedroom door clicked shut, the house returned to silence. Marcus lifted Leo into his arms and carried him to bed. He tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and whispered the promise he'd been whispering more frequently these days. I've got you. Always. Downstairs, Marcus sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He was breathing. Deep, controlled breaths. He had confronted her. He had heard her apologies. He had seen her tears. But none of it touched the truth. She hadn't been sorry when it mattered. She wasn't sorry when she lied every day. She was only sorry now that the truth had cornered her. His phone buzzed again. Elena, did you tell her? Are you okay? Marcus replied, after a long pause. It's begun. Elena sent one final message. Stay strong. They don't get to rewrite what they broke. As Marcus set his phone aside, clarity settled over him like armor. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It was already here. Tomorrow the real unraveling would begin. And he was ready. Morning came quietly, but the silence inside the Hale household felt nothing like peace. It was the brittle quiet of something fractured, held together only because neither person dared touch it yet. Marcus woke early, as he always did, but today he didn't move straight into routine. He sat on the edge of the bed, feet planted firmly on the ground, feeling the weight of every decision pressing against his ribcage. Beside him, Amelia lay awake. He knew it before she even stirred. Her breath was too careful, too measured. She was listening to him, waiting for any clue about where he stood. When she finally rolled onto her back, she stared up at the ceiling. Marcus, are we talking today? She whispered. Yes, he said, not turning toward her. Later, after Leo goes to school. She exhaled shakily, as if relieved he hadn't withdrawn completely. But Marcus wasn't offering comfort, only structure. Structure was all that remained between them now. They moved through breakfast like two strangers pretending to be familiar. Leo babbled happily about a school assembly, completely unaware of the thick tension in the air. Marcus laughed at all the right times, nodded at the details, packed Leo's lunch with a sticker on the lid. He looked to anyone watching like a father grounded in routine. And then Amelia tried to join the moment. Leo, she said gently, reaching for his hand. How about after school we all go for ice cream? Leo brightened instantly, eyes flicking to Marcus. Marcus forced a soft smile. We'll see, buddy. Let's take things one day at a time. Amelia's hand slipped back. She felt the meaning, even if Leo didn't. When Marcus dropped Leo at school, his son hugged him fiercely, longer than usual. I love you, Daddy, Leo whispered. Marcus swallowed hard. I love you too, more than anything. Leo released him and ran toward his classmates, leaving Marcus standing by the truck, hands clenched in his pockets. He took a slow breath, preparing himself for the conversation waiting at home. Amelia was already seated at the kitchen table when he returned, her hands folded tightly in front of her. She looked fragile in a way he hadn't seen in years. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes rimmed, red anxiety radiating off her like heat. But Marcus didn't sit immediately. He walked to the counter, poured himself a glass of water, and allowed her to feel the distance he was no longer willing to hide. "Marcus," she began, voice trembling. "I know I hurt you, but please don't shut me out. I want to fix this. I'll do anything." He finally sat across from her, posture straight, steady, detached. "Tell me the truth," he said calmly. "Not the edited version, not the soft version. The truth you've been keeping from me for months." She blinked rapidly, panic flashing across her features. I told you. It was a mistake. "In 8 months, Marcus said quietly. "At least." Her lips parted. Shock flickered across her face. She hadn't expected him to know the timeline. "That's not Marcus. It wasn't like that. It didn't start physically right away, I swear. I was lonely. I felt disconnected. You were always busy, always tired. Always working," he corrected, "to support this family." "Yes," she said quickly, "and I appreciate that, I do, but I felt lost. I felt like we weren't us anymore." Marcus stared at her, not with anger, but with an unsettling calm. "So instead of talking to me, you talk to him." "He listened," she whispered. "He made me feel seen." Marcus let the words hang between them. "Do you know what I see when I look at the footage from the office?" Her whole body tensed. "Marcus, please. I see you stepping over the lunch your son made," he said softly, a voice sharp as glass. "I see you laugh with him the way you used to laugh with me. I see you let him put his hands on you in the same place where you told me you were too busy to even take a break." Her face crumpled. "I'm sorry." "The thing is," Marcus continued, "I don't care anymore about why it started. I care about what you became during it." Her body sagged as if something inside her caved. He took a long breath. "I spoke with a lawyer." The color drained from Amelia's face. Her fingers twitched on the table. You already talked to a lawyer," she whispered. "Yes." Her eyes glistened with tears. "Marcus, please. Please don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I can fix this." He shook his head slowly. "This isn't something you fix with therapy. You didn't trip over a boundary. You tore through every one." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't want to lose my family. You lost it the moment you chose someone else," Marcus replied. She sobbed openly now, shoulders shaking, breath hitching. He watched without flinching, not cruelly, not indifferently, but with the clarity of someone who finally understood he wasn't responsible for another adult's choices. "Marcus," she begged, "what about Leo? He needs both of us. Please don't take him away." Her voice broke on the last words, fear spiking in her eyes. Marcus leaned forward, his voice a quiet anchor. "I'm not taking him away from you. I'm protecting him from instability, from lies, from growing up in a home where his parents sleep in separate lies." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "He deserves honesty," Marcus said. "Consistency. Love without conditions. You gave your love to someone else?" "I didn't." Amelia closed her eyes tightly. "I swear I'll end everything with him. Today, right now. I'll quit the job if I have to. Please. Marcus, please give me one more chance." "I gave you one every day for 8 months," he said softly. She looked up, desperation etched across her face. "Tell me what to do. Tell me what you need. I'll do anything." He studied her for a long, quiet moment. What he needed was peace. What he needed was dignity. What he needed was safety for Leo. And Amelia couldn't give him any of those, not anymore. "I need separation," he said finally. "Time apart, structure, a plan for Leo, and honesty for once." She collapsed into sobs again, but Marcus didn't move to comfort her. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because comforting her now would be lying. And he was done with lies. After several minutes, she managed to speak. "Do you still love me?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because the truth deserved to be said with care. "I love the woman I married," he said, "but I don't know who you are anymore." She covered her eyes with shaking hands. Marcus stood. "I'm going to take a walk. We'll talk logistics when I get back." "Marcus," she choked, "please don't leave." He paused at the doorway. "You left first." Outside, the cold air cut through him, grounding him. The sky was overcast, heavy with impending rain, fitting for the weight inside his chest. He walked without a destination, letting the motion drain the emotional static from his limbs. His phone buzzed. "Elena, did you talk to her?" Marcus replied, "Yes." Her response came seconds later, and Marcus stopped walking. He typed slowly, "She's terrified, but not because she regrets what she did. She's terrified because she got caught." Elena replied with a sad truth of her own. "They always are." After a moment, she added, "I'm filing tonight. You—" Marcus typed one word soon. He kept walking until the tension in his body eased enough for him to breathe normally again. Only then did he return home. Amelia was on the couch clutching a tissue, eyes red and swollen. She looked up when he entered, hope flickering like a dying candle. "Marcus, can we talk more?" "Yes," he said. "But understand this. You can cry, you can apologize, you can beg, but you can't undo what's been done." She nodded slowly, absorbing the finality in his tone. "We're going to do this with dignity," he continued. "No screaming, no blame games in front of Leo. No lies, no manipulation. We will behave like the parents he deserves, not the spouses we failed to be." Amelia covered her face again, shoulders trembling. Marcus watched her for a moment, then turned away, not unkindly, but with acceptance. This marriage was no longer a living thing. It was a memory, a lesson, a chapter soon to close. And tomorrow the truth would no longer be confined between them. It would be shared. It would be witnessed. It would be known. Tonight was the last quiet before impact. Marcus woke the next morning with the strange heaviness of a man walking toward a cliff he no longer feared. The house was quiet in that eerie way where silence feels like it's listening, waiting for what will happen next. He lay still for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything that was coming. Today he would meet with Connor again. Today plans would stop being theoretical and begin turning into action. Today the truth would begin moving toward the surface, whether Amelia was ready or not. When he finally got out of bed, he saw Amelia sitting at the dining table, already dressed, hair done, makeup carefully applied, but her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked like someone trying to present control, while her insides were unraveling. "Morning," she whispered. "Morning," Marcus replied, voice steady. Neither spoke further until Leo came bounding down the stairs, cheerful and oblivious. Amelia plastered on a smile, hugging him tightly, perhaps too tightly, as if afraid he might slip away too. Leo simply giggled, wriggling in her arms. Marcus watched the exchange, feeling a complicated twist in his chest. Amelia was still Leo's mother. And despite everything, Leo loved her without question. That truth mattered. It grounded him. This wasn't about punishing her. This was about protecting him. After breakfast, Marcus drove Leo to school as always. When he pulled up to the drop-off line, Leo leaned forward and hugged his father again. "Are you coming to my assembly Friday?" Leo asked, eyes wide with innocent excitement. Marcus smiled and rested his hand on his son's cheek. "Of course I am." Leo brightened. "Mom too." Marcus hesitated. "We'll see." "Okay." Leo chirped, then ran off toward his friends. When Leo disappeared inside the school building, Marcus sat in the truck and allowed the mask to fall for a moment. He rested his head against the steering wheel. Eyes closed. A deep exhale left him feeling hollow and full at the same time. He drove straight to Connor's office. Inside, Connor greeted him with the gravity of someone who knew a war was about to begin. "I reviewed everything," the lawyer said, gesturing for Marcus to sit. "And now that you've confronted her, at least partially, we need to move forward quickly. She might panic. She might try to redirect the narrative. She might seek her own attorney." Marcus nodded. "What's our next step?" Connor slid 2 documents across the desk. The first, a preliminary custody agreement proposal. The second, a petition for formal separation. Marcus stared at the papers. Seeing them in black and white made the reality settle even deeper. Marcus, Connor said gently, "I know this is hard, but you're doing what's necessary, and you're doing it with integrity." Marcus nodded again, slower this time. "I don't want to destroy her." "You're not," Connor said firmly. "She destroyed the marriage. You're protecting your son's stability." Marcus signed the documents with hands that barely shook. When he finished, Connor placed everything into a secure folder and said, "I'll handle the filings. You focus on what comes next." "What comes next?" Marcus asked. "Telling the truth," Connor said. "To the people who need to hear it. Not for the drama, but so she can't twist the story." Marcus swallowed. He hated that part. Hated the idea of exposing the intimate failures of their marriage. But he knew Connor was right. Truth needed witnesses. He left the office and sat in the truck for a moment, letting the decision settle. Then he drove to the one place he never imagined he'd go again so soon, Horizon Bridge. As he walked through the lobby, the receptionist watched him with subtle recognition, maybe even sympathy. Rumors traveled fast in office buildings. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor but didn't approach Amelia's office. Instead, he walked to HR. The head of HR, a middle-aged woman named Denise, looked up when he knocked on her door. "Mr. Hale," she said, surprised. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Marcus said. "It's about something happening on this floor." Her brow furrowed and she gestured for him to sit. Marcus explained everything he had learned, not with vengeance, not with bitterness, but with precision. The relationship, the misuse of company time, the repeated inappropriate behavior on workplace property. He showed her the hallway footage. Denise's face hardened. "Mr. Hale, I had suspicions, but having confirmed evidence, this changes everything." "I'm not asking for revenge," Marcus said quietly. "I'm asking for the truth to be handled professionally." Denise nodded. "It will be. Thank you for coming forward." As Marcus left the HR office, he passed several employees who had clearly heard whispers. Some glanced at him with pity, others with quiet respect. He didn't care about their opinions. He cared about the integrity of his own actions. Halfway down the hall, he saw Priya. She approached hesitantly. "Marcus, are you all right?" "As much as I can be," he said honestly. She looked at him with watery eyes. "You didn't deserve any of this. I hope you know that." He nodded softly. "Thank you." "And if you need a witness," she whispered, "I'll be one." His throat tightened. "I appreciate that more than you know." He left the building before he could see Amelia. This wasn't the place for their final confrontation. That moment deserved a different stage. When he arrived home, he found Amelia in the living room, sitting on the couch with her knees pulled to her chest. She looked up quickly when he entered. "Where were you?" she asked, voice trembling. "I met with my lawyer," Marcus said plainly. She inhaled sharply, fear flooding her features. "Marcus, please." "And I went to HR." Her eyes widened with something between shock and panic. You told them. Why? Why would you do that?" "Because what you and Adrian did at work wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a violation of policies, of ethics, of professional boundaries." She stood abruptly. "You're trying to ruin me." "No," Marcus said, voice steady. "I'm letting the truth stand on its own." Her breathing grew shallow. "We could have handled this privately." "You handled it privately," Marcus said. "For 8 months. Now it's time for honesty." She shook her head violently. "Marcus, please. I can't lose my job. It's everything I worked for." "It's a job," he interrupted. "Not your marriage. That didn't seem to matter." She pressed her trembling hands to her face. "I made a mistake." "No," Marcus said softly, firmly. "You made a decision. Over and over again." He walked past her to the kitchen counter and placed a copy of the separation papers there. "We're separating," he said. "Temporarily, for now. Legally, for Leo's sake, we'll establish schedules and routines. I'll stay here for the moment so his life isn't disrupted and you can find a temporary place nearby." She stared at the papers like they were fire. "Marcus, Please don't do this, she whispered. I already did, he said. She turned away, sobbing silently, shoulders shaking with the weight of consequences she never thought would reach her. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't criticize. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood in the kitchen, breathing the steady breath of a man who had accepted truth, embraced clarity, and chosen strength. After several minutes, Amelia whispered, Do you hate me? Marcus looked at her for a long moment. No, he said gently. I don't hate you. I just don't trust you. And those are not the same thing. She broke into fresh sobs. Marcus walked past her without adding anything else. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. There was nothing more to say. Upstairs, he sat on the floor beside Leo's bed, watching his son napping peacefully after a long day of school. He rested a hand gently on Leo's back. You're safe, he whispered. I promise. Because while Amelia had shattered the marriage, Marcus would not allow the fallout to shatter their son. Outside, the sky darkened. Inside, the truth settled into its place. Quiet, heavy, unavoidable. Tomorrow the real consequences would begin. In the end, Marcus's journey reminds us that heartbreak doesn't define us. How we rise from it does. Betrayal may shatter the life we knew, but it also reveals the strength we never realized we carried. Healing begins the moment we choose honesty over illusion, dignity over chaos, and self-worth over someone else's choices. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what hurts and walk toward what's true. And even in the darkest moments, love, real, steady, unconditional love, can still be found in the people who need us most. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part resonated the most? Share your feelings in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful emotional storytelling.